like to welcome first the moderator for tonight. She is the force behind Taschen's incredible Library of Esoterica book series, and she's a contributing artist here at PRS. Please welcome to the stage Jess Hundley.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, PRS, this magical place. I'll give a quick plug for our wonderful publisher, Taschen. We also did a beautiful new version of the Secret Teachings of All Ages, which you can find in the bookstore. I'm just going to welcome in all these wonderful people, and then we'll all introduce you to who we are when we all are seated. So why don't you guys just come on up? These are our wonderful panelists. I am as Alex said, the editor of a multi-volume ongoing series called the Library of Esoterica, which is an encyclopedia of esoteric practices and traditions that Taschen publishes. And Nick Taylor, to my right, is my partner in this amazing opportunity we have. He's the designer of all the books. He's also the designer of the Secret Teachings of All Ages. I had worked with Taschen for many years. I started working on this series, and our in-house editor there introduced Nick and I to this wonderful person on his right, Kikan Massara, and said, I have another project for you guys I think will be interesting. This is 2018. So here we are. It was called the 12 Steps. Here we are 5 years later. So first off, I'm going to have Nick do the introductions because I can't read my own printing. So.
Okay. First I'll tell you guys briefly who I am. I'll try not to read it. My wife Jennifer and I run a design studio here in LA called Thunderwing, and I taught for 10 years at the School of Visual Arts in New York, typography and graphic design, and also like just for young people to feel confident in their work and go out there and get jobs in this wonderful business. And then, as Jessica said, we've designed the Secret Teachings of All Ages with Taschen and working with PRS and 12 Steps and the Library of Esoterica. And every time we start a new project, we always meet here in this library. And without any chanting, we have sort of a ritual and write a table of contents, and it's a really special place that is sort of like the fulcrum of a lot of the work that we do together. So then I'm going to tell you about each of these lovely people. Kikan Massara is the author of Taschen's 12 Steps, Symbols, Myths, and Archetypes of Recovery. She is a psychotherapist and passionate researcher of consciousness studies, meditation, and emotional health, and has long used visual arts, symbols, and myths in her practice to facilitate access to the empowering resources of the inner world. Amanda de Cadenet is the host and executive producer of The Conversation with Amanda de Cadenet and Victoria's Secret podcast, VS Voices. She is a director, photographer, and best-selling author of It's Messy, On Boys, Boobs, and Badass Women, Girl Gaze, How Girls See the World, and Rare Birds. She is an advocate and founder of Girl Gaze and has been named one of the Fast Company's most creative people in business. And Gaetano Vaccaro is a licensed clinical psychologist and certified sex addiction therapist. He is currently the consulting executive director with Constellations Behavioral Health for Bridges to Recovery, a primary mental health facility in Beverly Hills. Dr. Vaccaro is the creator of RISC, Relationships, Intimacy, and Sexual Compulsivity, a cutting-edge multimodal treatment program for substance abuse, sexual compulsivity, and process addictions. With over 30 years of experience, he has served in a variety of management and clinical director positions in the addiction recovery industry. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's all of us.
That's us. I just want to first off thank you to PRS. Again, this is an incredible resource to Los Angeles. You are sitting on this beautiful campus that has been dedicated to seekers. There's actually a plaque out front that says dedicated to the seekers of all time. We are going to be moving after this talk into that amazing library that Alex mentioned, where Kikan will be signing books. We also, I want to thank Misha's Foods and Optimist Drinks, who are going to be giving us treats and beautiful botanical drinks after the talk as well. And I just want to sort of, we're here in this beautiful space and we're here in this circle together, and the first thing I want to do is just kind of, part of, we had the great honor of working with Alcoholics Anonymous with their archives, seeing letters, and really kind of diving deep. Kikan worked and did years of research with them. And one of the things about AA is anonymity, so we just want to make sure everyone here who might be part of the program can feel safe and their anonymity be respected. So this conversation will be about the history of AA and about the development of the 12 steps and about many other amazing topics. So I just wanted to kind of set the stage with that. I would like to kick off with Kikan sort of telling us about where this seed of the idea started and a little bit about how it grew. Is this good?
Yes.
Oh, it's good.
Okay. Well, the inspiration came at one very distinct moment when I was visiting a very dear friend in London, and only recently did I realize that there was a previous inspiration that went way back. But that particular time that I was visiting with my friend, we share various interests like art, and books, and both of us have spent time in Japan and stuff like that. And before going to sleep, you sleep against a wall of books. As I was just flicking through various books of hers, art books from Japan, and I came across these beautiful stepping stones, that they have in the rock gardens, sometimes in calm waters, sometimes in rushing water, and in the morning, there was just this little thought that just dropped in very distinctly. It wasn't loud at all, and it just went, what a pity that the 12 steps had not been visually illustrated yet. Enough. Then months followed where images just kept on hitting me, I would be somewhere, there would be an image that would sort of speak of these amazing steps. And eventually I started to collect them, because I was actually really steeped in another project altogether that had to do with emotional skill building. And so this one was just sort of hovering. It kept on coming to me. And so I collected the images and eventually decided to write a proposal, which I did in a very special place, much like this is. It's the Archive for Research in Archetypal Symbolism at the Jung Institute in New York, and they have 20,000 images collected. It's an amazing place. And the curator at the time, Ami Romberg, is an old friend of mine, another Swede, and she was the editor-in-chief of the Taschen book, The Book of Symbols. So I sat in this amazing place and wrote the proposal, went back to Europe, and that was it, And then one day in a conversation with her on the phone, I said, do you think Taschen could be interested in this? And both of us kind of went, this subjects, not so sure. But she suggested that she would show it to the editor that they worked with. And like good Swedes, we decided that it should be sent on the summer solstice when the light was the highest in the sky, the best day of the year, which is what we did. And then what followed, was the whole journey of creation. Peaks and valleys, messes, chaos, amazing synchronicity, beauties, all of this. And eventually I got to work with Jessica and with Nick. And for those of you who've seen the book, you know that there's serenity on every page, and that is 100% Mr. Nick. He's managed to put serenity, even beside really tough subjects. So, and so that was a whole journey, obviously. And then, when the book went to the printers, late October, late October, there was a real awakening, because I realized I would have to talk about what I'd written, and that really was not natural to me. And I wondered, where this passion came from, and I wondered what had inspired it, and I wondered how I had committed so deeply to this. And I mean, I knew, that to be helpful and to be of service was one obvious reason. But then a memory came to me, and it was from the year that I was starting school. I was raised in the north of Sweden in a little town. And this memory came of this Indian boy who was younger than me, who came in the middle of winter to live with friends of my parents. And I was asked to be kind to him, and to play with him. And what happened was that the only toys he had were Indian gods and goddesses. And all he played were myths with Indian gods and goddesses that I knew nothing about, but I was completely mesmerized by all of this. And then my father explained to me that this young man, or this boy, had come because his homeland was in crisis, and this man called Mahatma Gandhi had brought down the rulers, the mighty British Empire, and showed me a picture of Mahatma Gandhi. Well, there was this skinny guy in sandals and a bit of loincloth, and these huge benevolent eyes, kind smile, and it just didn't make sense, but something hit my psyche in this moment. And it was that everything he had was happening inside of him. And he must have clued into something, and my father explained that he had done it by a non-violent approach to change. So I know that I was transformed in that moment, and I wanted what he had. And then followed, lifetime or going down various paths of healing and transformation, the inquest of these principles, these timelines, guidelines to living, and wanting peace desperately and serenity. And the 12 steps are absolutely masterful in helping people align with these timeless principles in everyday life. And they have proven again and again and again for millions of people, all kinds of issues and challenges, to help people across very rough patches of their lives, to come home to themselves, to their authentic true selves, and to really thrive. And this is something that many people are looking for today, and addict or not, just being human can be incredibly tricky to navigate. We're spiritual and human at once, It's pretty messy. The contradictions are many, and the book, if you want, is a really humble dedication and celebration of the 12 steps. But they are placed in this field of other influences, you know, that have to do with these timeless principles that show up in so many ways, you know, throughout our history. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you. It's interesting because, you know, books have this way of manifesting. They're a very slow process. It's in a world that moves very fast. Books are inherently very slow. It takes time and focus. And it's interesting, this book took quite a while, and Kikan had been working on it since before we were brought in. So, but I think about it now, and I think now is the perfect time for this book to arrive in the world. And maybe even a better time than 5 years ago when it maybe would have been out. So I don't know if maybe one of you would want to speak to that, because I know you both have seen the book, and just relating it to the now, to where we are now.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in and say, you know, I'm here because I'm a super fan of this book. I got wind of it through Jessica, and once I saw it, I was so excited by it, and I think it's a really beautiful medium that you've created to share the 12 steps with people outside of the 12-step rooms. Because currently all of the literature that's available on the 12 steps is AA approved literature. This is the first book that I've seen that expands, I mean, this is like such an LA thing to say, but it's going to expose the 12 steps to a larger audience. You know, and I mean that in the best possible way, you know? So when I saw it, I just thought, what an incredible opportunity to bring these philosophies and concepts that you've so masterfully aggregated and illustrated into a book, so that, you know, people who don't know what the 12 steps are will have an opportunity to learn about them and to experience them in a new way. So I was just so excited by what I had seen, and you know, thank you for creating this.
One of the things that moved me when Nick sent me the book and when I saw the book is that I realized in my practice for so many years, the big book of AA is really kind of the Bible, and a lot of people that have been working with that were also looking for a way to make it deeper, to deepen the experience of it, to have something that's more subliminal to them. And when I was doing my dissertation was on the expressive and symbolic function of sexual compulsivity, which I was using some of the same kinds of ideas, of creating some imagery and archetypes. And because it's such a deeply personal thing, addictions, they're so stigmatized, but also it's an incredible vehicle for transformation and personal growth. And part of that transformation comes through dreams, it comes through synchronicity. And so I love, the book feels so poetic to me, because as you're moving through it, it's almost like you're moving through a dream state, where you're kind of in the reality of what the 12 steps say, but then you're in this liminal space where you're open to other kinds of interpretation and other kinds of growth. So it's this beautiful mixture of sort of the real and the unseen. And it is kind of Jung's philosophy that you have to make the unconscious conscious in order to begin the process of individuation and transformation. And part of what we do as therapists is we help to kind of move into the psyche and make some of those unconscious motivations that are feeding the addiction to make them more conscious so they can transform. So I love the feel of the book because it actually moves you in and out in this really beautiful way.
And I mean, just as a personal anecdote, I find it kind of interesting that I had lost touch with a really close friend, probably like my best friend growing up, and things had gotten kind of quiet with him, and I was wondering what was going on. And it like went for a year, and I kept asking my wife, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, is this something that I did? It's like classic child of an alcoholic kind of behavior, because it was my fault. When we finished this book, I sent it to my friend, and he called me immediately, and of course we spent 3 hours on the phone. But the things that he read back to me about his experience in reading it was, I don't think he had finished it yet, but he's like, just what happened with us, the disconnection, having all of us having gone through this like strange past 4 or 5 years of like being pulled apart, like families being sort of pulled apart across the world, and being pulled apart from your best friends, and all these weird things we've been undergoing. And then we've been primed for that with 15, 20 years of social media that have also kind of like pulled us apart, and we're always here. And the message of the book is so much about like just sort of taking down these walls and getting a little bit closer and kind of overcoming the disconnection. So coming back to what you were saying, it's like that is the now of it. It's like something we've all been feeling, we've all been going through. And so I feel like it's like a real balm for everything we've been going through together.
There's also this element that is about connecting with other people. The first step is admitting helplessness. The last step is helping others. So there's this circle of connection that's inherent to the 12 steps, which is so much about asking for help and admitting that helplessness, that vulnerability to others. I want to talk back up a little bit about the connection between the formation of the steps, and if Kikan, you could talk a little bit about Carl Jung and his relationship to Bill W., their letters, a little bit about
Yes.
Mr. Jung,
Well,
Dr. Jung.
yeah. Thank you, guys. It was just 3 months before Carl Jung died that he realized the impact that it had on the spiritual foundation of AA. As he got a letter from Bill W., the co-founder. What Bill was explaining was that he thought that actually the foundation had begun already many decades before because of Carl Jung. And that was an episode where somebody, a patient of Jung's, some people thought that it was in the 30s, but it's now been established that it was in 1926. A man called Roland Hazard, a US senator and businessman who had struggled with his binge drinking desperately and couldn't, he tried everything. And eventually he went into analysis with Jung in Switzerland, then left, and within a short period of time he relapsed. And he came back to Jung to say, got to start again, guy, we've got to start again. And Jung said, no. There's no point in doing that. People with your condition, with chronic alcoholism, they're not going to be helped by medicine or by psychiatry. And I've been trying to elicit something, in our sessions that could help, but it didn't work, and it hasn't before, in my own experience. And Hazard got quite desperate about this kind of no solution answer, but there must be something. And Jung explained that the only thing that he'd seen work was a spiritual experience, but an experience that really transformed. It wasn't about sort of going to church kind of every Sunday. It was you had to be transformed by my spirit kind of thing. And Hazard went on to he had a cousin, Susan Keith, who had told him about the Oxford group in New York. And Hazard then ended up getting sober with their help, and trickling back to Jung, I better mention this, that Hazard started to help other alcoholics, one of whom was Bill W., the future co-founders of AA, a school friend of his. And so there was a sort of a trickle effect. But Bill W., he used Jungian analysis himself for several years in the 40s when he became depressed. But there was no connection between Jung, in contrast to what many people think. They think that Bill W. went to work with Jung. But there was somebody who knew both of these men, Margarita Lüttichau, who on the one hand studied with Jung in Switzerland, and on the other hand knew Bill W. in New York. And she would sort of introduce the men to each other's ideas. So Jung knew about Alcoholics Anonymous.
There was a woman behind it. I knew it.
There was. And she gave Bill W. Jung's book called Modern Man in Search of the Soul in the 40s. There we go. And then, in 1963, Bill W. coughed out the letter to Jung and just said, "You changed, you were the origin of this." And Jung went, "Really?" Wrote back, and this letter now is hanging on the walls of Stepping Stones Foundation outside of New York. Yeah. But I just want to say also that many of Jung's ideas have helped people, throughout time, and they very much overlap with 12-step principles and such.
I think, one of the things my personal connection, I have a family member who has been sober for 45 years and, in the program, and the power, having seen sort of the power of these steps, this book has been such a personal project for me on that level, because I think that because of the anonymity aspect, and because people, they just haven't had, unless you are in the program, you don't necessarily have access to the literature, but to be able to share the ideas, which, AA is happy to share these concepts with more people that know, the better. And then also to kind of be able to share it in a way that feels maybe not mired so much by a particular dogma, or there's spirit there's the spiritual sort of element to it, but it's not necessarily a God, it's whatever source is to you. And also to ground it in art and the sort of emotions of the steps as conveyed with art. So maybe if Nick, you want to talk a little bit about the design of the book. We, as Nick said, we kind of have a sacred geometry to our encyclopedia series that we're doing. There's a numerology, there's Easter eggs within it, and Nick puts a lot of sort of deep thought into how the book is conveyed, how the ideas are conveyed on the page. You're seeing here some pages from the book, and there is a sort of idea around, as Kikan said, a sort of serenity. The full page that has been circling of the masks is actually what's called the end papers, which is the inside, when you open up the book, the inside covers. But do you want to talk a little bit about your approach to the design?
So we're looking at a few different layouts, and something that you'll notice is that the page is kind of divided into three spaces, which is there's a top area, which they call this a wash line, which is where all the body copy is living below, and then spread throughout, you'll see above that space, sort of, if you want to almost think about it as like a sky space. There's poems and quotes that sort of hover in that space. And then the body copy is, of course, the narrative that runs throughout the sort of connective tissue of the whole book. And then below is caption information. And so the way that they relate, you see that the captions and the body copy are kind of in this like inextricable dance where the longer the caption is, it pushes up into the space. And that was kind of inspired by, there's like, you can find like really not cool jokes about books on philosophy where there's like one line at the top and then the rest of the page is a footnote. There's just like one line. And I'm sure, I think David Foster Wallace made like some design jokes about that in his books. But then also, another thing that he referenced was the sort of the shape of the Talmud. And the Talmud has these like beautiful columns of text that run across pages, and there are multiple threads that are going on at the same time, and the shapes of the different portions of the type relate and sort of guide your consciousness as you're reading through it. And you're probably reading this way, not that way. And then the typeface that we used is a typeface called Optima. That it's the thing that's really cool about it is that even it's called a flared serif, so it's like a little bit. It's not quite a normal serif like you see, and it's not a grotesque or a sans serif that doesn't have any feet. But what's cool about it is that if you were to zoom in on it, even straight lines are actually made using gigantic circles. So the designer Hermann Zapf, worked in incredible ways to use just circular shapes to create all the different, like you see, you can kind of see on that M, like the left side, even though it's straight, it's really this kind of large circle. And then we have the lotus as the sort of symbol that ties the book together. Partly because, we love the symbol of like the lotus coming up through the mud and emerging out into the light, which is just a great symbolic thing. But then also the 12 petals of the lotus, or the 12 steps. And as you sort of go around, you don't come back to the beginning, but you come back almost like a helix. You come back to the beginning, but you're either you're holding people's hands as you go, which comes back to the cover of the book, which is that it's you can't do it. I mean, you can't do it alone. Doing it in a vacuum doesn't really make sense. And that's I feel like something that we should all talk about is the transformative power of navigating the steps and the relationship to the addiction. I was just thinking about how, the way that when you say AA, I mean, of course we know what it stands for, but the steps are about stuff other than just like substance abuse. It's about a much, much bigger thing. And, even if you like live a life where you think, oh, I'm doing everything right, I'm comfortable with myself, I'm happy or whatever, but then you don't stand up for yourself when other people are talking to you in a certain way or whatever. Like, that's a thing you need to work on. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So
there's a program for everything, especially in LA. It's like the mecca of recovery.
Yeah.
Like anything you are dealing with, the 12 steps are a program for life. You can just sort of apply it to whatever you want. I actually have a question, if that's okay. I'm curious what happened when you reached out to Alcoholics Anonymous, the central office, and said, I want to do this book. What was their response? Because this is the first piece of literature that's been published with AA endorsement, if you will, participation outside of official literature.
I wouldn't call it an endorsement, because they don't endorse,
Yeah, right. I mean,
but
they participated with sharing information, right?
Yeah.
Or did they not? Tell speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, with pleasure.
They just sent their invoice, so they definitely
They
participated.
don't-
I've been CC'd on their invoice.
Oh, well.
Gotta stay alive somehow.
Exactly. They were nothing but kind and welcoming and helpful, and the archivists there, absolutely delightful to deal with. However, they have an issue with images. I mean, it's one thing, the texts, but with images, they never really cleared the copyrights in the beginning. And therefore, there are very, very few images that they have available for you to use, because, they want to do the right thing.
It's mostly photography you're talking about.
Yes,
like
Portraits of people,
Portraits,
right?
Portraits
Yeah.
of Bill W., portraits of the founders, yeah.
So that is one thing, and I basically suggested to them that there must be a lot of images that they could turn into a book, and they've actually done that. They've done a little book on kind of the typewriter, you know, and the different...
But who did you speak to? Because there's
I
no
spoke
like leaders
to-
in AA,
No,
so I'm
no.
kind of curious, like who's
Copyright
running it?
is the public relations
Okay,
person
yeah,
at the
yeah.
time. She's now retired, and then the archivist, the woman in head of the, who's the head of the archives with all the letters, etc. But what I had to do, because there were so few images that weren't very well known, I wanted to dig deeper and find, you know, material that hadn't been seen before. And there's a foundation called Stepping Stones Foundation, which is outside in Katona, New York. And that's a little bit more complicated because AA World Services is very organized, super easy to collaborate. They just basically say, if you're a member of AA, please don't be public about it, because and they operate on the AA traditions. Other sources of images do not do that, and so it becomes, and they might not be very organized, and that's what happened in the case of Stepping Stones. It became a very long, drawn out, you know, trips to the States, spending time there, you know, having to have the project passed by the once a year, you know, board of trustees, and etc., etc. But eventually, we have some images in this book that have not really been publicly seen, and they did, unbelievably so, pry open the frame of that, you know, of where Jung's letter to Bill W. You know, has been living for many decades, photocopied it, and there's other documentation there as well. That, well, it was a journey.
Yeah, thank
Enough
you.
said?
Yeah, no, I was just so curious. I think one of the other things that I found really interesting is that because AA is, and 12-step is sort of non-denominational, there's suggestions about a higher power, but it's really up to every individual, whatever they interpret that as. What I thought was so interesting in the book is that you've provided kind of illustrations and sort of so many different options for people. You really kept that sort of non-denominational thing, because one of the things that puts people off with the 12 steps is, and there's even a part of the big book that talks about, you know, if you're an atheist, you can still be involved in the 12 steps. So I love that you've kind of covered this wide group of options for people with whatever beliefs they have. I thought that was really important, and I saw that throughout the book, which I thought was so interesting.
That was very intentional. That was a dialogue that we all had, was to make sure that the images that you were seeing outside of and one of the reasons you're not seeing some of the Bill W. Photos and the photo of the thing is because we're not allowed to show it as promotion. So Stepping Stones made that clear, so that's why it's not on the slideshow. So they're in the book. But the artwork, we did really try to make sure it felt expansive and inclusive of a lot of different modalities.
Wait a second, can you just expand on that a little more about not using the images for promotion? Is that because of the tradition of being a program of attraction rather than promotion, or what is that about? Yes. Okay.
So
Just
that is actually group conscience,
yes.
you know, established by AA World Services, that no living or a dead person who was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous can be, you know, they will not allow the photographs to be used. But interestingly, recent publications do have photographs of both co-founders, and those are AA World Service publications. I thought that was a bit strange.
But we can't, for instance, when we're giving images to press, we can't give those images. Or when we're doing an event like this, we can't use those images, but they are in the book. So, yeah.
What I love about that is that it actually speaks to the transformation of AA itself, from the Oxford group and some of the early underpinnings of the Judeo-Christian tradition of AA, and then how it has moved and expanded to include other cultures. And I think that's a very important process that happened. And it happened over so many years that Jung didn't really even realize that he had contributed to it. And I think it's that full circle of, you never really, it's part of the AA tradition, no one really created it themselves. You know, there's a wonderful book that has how the big book was actually written and all the inscriptions on it. And it's just this great thing of how collaborative it was. Nobody had the secret, nobody had the idea. Everybody had to come together, which is what the first edition was about, just adults helping each other. Before anything was even built, they were just trying to figure out how to make it through the next day. So, and I think that's the spiritual transformation that everybody's going to 12-step programs for. And 12 steps are used, as you've said, everything. I mean, 12 steps have been co-opted into every kind of addiction, every kind of ailment, process addiction, so it's a very useful process.
I think there were 700 the last time, such fellowships when I last
Wait,
did.
how many?
700,
Wow,
basing them on the 12 steps.
that's incredible. Yeah, I was also thinking about how the updating of the 12 steps. I don't know if I haven't got all the way through the book. I've got most of the way through the steps because I've really been paying attention in really taking it slowly and looking at everything. But if you look at like ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, there's a lot more contemporary language and sort of, I don't want to say like updates, but you know, they sort of put more contemporary language and a framework around the 12 steps for the adult children program, for example, which I thought was so interesting when I read that. I was like, oh, this is from like 1984, they wrote these updates, you know? So it's been fascinating to sort of watch this evolution. I'm sort of curious what's going to come from here even, you know?
Well, and also, I think it's because the program had very strict traditions that the 12 steps could be applied across a variety of different venues. There was no restriction of, this belongs to us, no one else can use it. It's like, this is how we make it through the day. So if that can help you in whatever you're struggling with, then use these principles. And I think that's why it's been co-opted into a lot of different organizations. And then from that, other self-help traditions started to grow, like rational recovery, and there's a variety of different recovery systems.
What is that?
Rational recovery is a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of framework that has removed some of the religious or spiritual underpinnings of the 12 steps. So basically, it's apocryphal now, that the idea was that the first 12 steps were really only 10 steps, and then Jung added the first 2, because he said, you're not going to get anywhere unless you have a spiritual transformation, as you described. So there was this kind of idea of, okay, if you're really getting hung up on the first 2 steps, then let's just move into sort of the cognitive behavioral, the rational idea of it. But it still is this thing of, how do you get through resentments? How do you get through amends? How do you repair your life? How do you actually create relationships with each other? And addiction is, by its very nature, an internal process. And you fall into the self, the more you fall into your addiction. So the only way out of the hole is by someone grabbing a hand for you.
Yeah, I mean, people have often talked about with addiction that it's like the lens is pointed back at yourself, and with the 12 steps, it helps to shift your perspective out towards your fellows, you know, and some kind of higher power.
What do they say, put down the magnifying glass and pick up a mirror?
That's dangerous. It depends what program you're in, right? Because there are some programs who will like get your focus off of them and back onto you.
Right.
So,
but you know, the other day you were talking about like reluctance to engage in the steps, sort of like how people cross the threshold into starting to participate, and some of the hurdles conceptually about how they start to engage. I loved what you were saying about that. I want to know if you want to expand on that
I
a
don't
little
remember
bit.
what I said.
Actually, Gaetano.
Gaetano?
Yeah, Gaetano.
Okay, because I was like, we did a Zoom with a bunch of us, for all of us, and I was like, were you looking at me? Because I don't remember saying anything about that.
One of the things that I think is amazing about the 12 steps is that you actually, you try to do them sequentially, but you really don't. You kind of jump in and then you get derailed. Because when you start actually sort of taking a look at yourself, okay, that's really awful, I'm not going to do that. And so then you back away from it. But it is the same thing, it's like that liminal space that the book provides. It's like you start unfolding in these ways that you didn't plan. And so even if there's resistance, because in therapy we sort of roll with resistance, we have a lot of theories about how to do that. But basically the idea of resistance isn't bad. It is just the way that the psyche is beginning to unfold. And you can't rush it. It's on its own time frame. There's a kind of protectiveness to it because your psyche is not going to open up in a way that's going to destroy you. So so basically when people are holding out, we're like, okay, that's fine. Do what you can, and then come back. And so the idea of keep coming back isn't about you're going to keep coming back and waiting for that big epiphany. Just keep coming back and see how it unfolds for you. And so resistance is not, I don't see resistance as a problem. I think resistance is a very protective part of the wounded parts of our psyche are trying to be really clear about who's going to see that, whether I'm going to be given the honor of sharing that space or not, and if I'm safe to reveal that to. And so I think that's the same thing that happens in the course of recovery, is that there's parts of you that want to know, is it safe for me to show you that?
That's also the power of community with 12-step. I mean, it's a community process, and that's the beauty of, sponsorship and being sponsored and having, one hand out in front and one hand behind. And I think providing that safety is one of the most powerful things that 12-step groups give for people who maybe never felt safe before in their life. That's an incredibly powerful thing to give another human being, to really see them and to be seen. And that is, you just don't really find that in the world for fun and for free,
I mean, what is more wonderful than to feel heard and to be acknowledged and to feel that you're sharing something, that you have something in common with other people. And, I feel that the disconnect that we experience in our era, in our society, in our culture, etc., these ideas that we're separate individuals, the endless kind of idea that we must manage everything on our own, that willpower is it, our own agency, self-reliance, etc. All of these values that have so broken us, fragmented us in terms of feeling connected, all of that is possible to mend in a place like a 12-step process or other enlightened versions. It builds new connections, but it heals the broken connection with yourself, with others, and with the spiritual dimension of your being. And I mean, who has not been in a moment of despair over something they couldn't change themselves? I mean, what human being has not encountered these, like this first step, of admitting powerlessness. It's not helplessness of not being able to do something. It is powerlessness of changing something. You need new power. You need new energy from somewhere else. These are it's very human to feel powerless, but to admit it is absolutely not culturally endorsed. Anyway, an additional point is that you were talking about the rightful timing of this book. On this September 20th, a physicist called Nassim Haramein published a paper which basically proves that at the most fundamental level of existence, of materia, there is unity. There is unity at the heart of matter. And 12-step fellowships, the ethos of 12 steps is unity, to put the common good before the individual and such. I mean, we are not, a new story is being told, we are not separate. We are connected, we are interdependent. Oh God, I get shivers. We are interconnected. And can you imagine how safe we can feel when we know that we are connected and that we are actually not separate, we never will be. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, the 12-step, triangle, unity, recovery, and service. And I think all three of those, right? We're not alone. The unity piece is what you're speaking to. And being of service that's at the premise. I mean, you've been of service in making this book, all of you,
I think it's time to open it up and unify with our audience. Let's have a bit of Q&A before we.
I'll jump in.
The question was expanding on the concept of principles.
Yes. Well, throughout human history and on practically all paths of transformation and healing, there are certain guidelines, and they are sometimes called perennial wisdom. They're sometimes called, they appear in Egypt. They appear all over the place in different religions, in different esoteric societies. The idea is that with certain concepts, these principles, you can align with them and live a good life as a human being. And so if you take a principle like honesty, for example, that's prevalent in most philosophical perspectives. We speak about honesty. Well, in the 12 steps, you have honesty, represented in step 1 as self-honesty. Then you have honesty with others, that is step 5. And then you have honesty when you're asking to be removed of certain character defects, by the help of something that is greater than yourself. That's again honesty. And then you have step 10, where you have sort of an ongoing awake and aware self-honesty in the course of daily life. So honesty would be one, integrity would be another, justice would be another, compassion, forgiveness. What else do we have? Service without question, but the good of all, unity. I don't know.
I love all these words.
I love
them. That's one of my favorite words.
Yeah. So they've always been presented to the human being, and today I think they are just becoming very apparent. People want to live according to certain values, and yeah.
You think people are seeking those values more because people feel so lost and disconnected? Yeah.
Does that answer your question a bit?
There's the big book, and then have you put in more explanations and more examples, or did you stick with the original written principles, but then add more background to it?
Well, I'll answer to that. I've tried to show the utmost respect for the big book and for also for other contemporary perspectives on the 12 steps. But I just found one of my personal drivers was the quest for these principles. And they've never been articulated in AA. The only time that they actually were was when Bill W. was doing a round of trips around to the various groups, and somebody says,
That was his book tour, right?
Exactly. And so what are these principles? And they've never been official. And he came back like a year later and he said, well, you know, when we work with our character defects, you know, we work fear into faith, for example. So he looked at it like that. But that was Bill W. And I've taken huge liberty in terms of following my own sense of there being these interconnected other subjects. I felt that, you know, humanity has always wanted to expand the limits of, you know, being human, and that belonged, and you know, and then Jung belonged, and this belonged. I mean, I've taken liberties for sure, and you know, this is not an official AA World Service book at all, but I'm trying to be very, very respectful for it. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for a beautiful conversation. My question is about the interplay between the words and the images, and I'm wondering if you did the writing and then found images that go in, or if ever the image inspired your developing the concepts.
Yes.
I can give you an example. I mean, I am very image receptive. I mean, I can tell you just the way that I found images, because I ended up finding most of the images, and then we discovered we couldn't get the rights, so we couldn't get the high res, and we had to change 50 of them or whatever. I go on walks. I put myself in places of images, and I go on walks where I turn right, you know, and I normally turn left, and I sort of go on a 2-hour walk around Paris, you know, in and out. And I did, on one of these walks, I just turned right when I normally turn left. And there was a lamppost, you know, just riddled with stickers. I mean, it was thick with stickers. And a little poster of this man. Step one, you know? And then that was a long journey of tracking down the artist, because he'd moved from Paris to Yugoslavia, and his daughter didn't respond, and that took years. But you know, so some of these images have a long story. I love writing to an image, but that was not always the case. Hence Nick's answer, you know. And then in desperate situations, you know, I would call upon Nick and Jessica.
Nick and I have, with our book series, which is it's about conveying these esoteric, I like to say conveying these traditions and practices in the Trojan horse of like amazing art, so that we can let them out into the world in a way that maybe feels a little less scary and a little more inclusive to people. And so we luckily are amazing licensing image team member here, Lisa Dorn is here, she's incredible. And we have been, all three of us, working on our books and establishing relationships with different archives all over the world. And so when we found out Tasshin's very amazing printing, only the highest quality. It's very hard to find images in high enough resolutions, especially in more obscure. So we started to dig into a lot of the archives that we had been working with on our books, because there is a connection, obviously, and started talking about emotionally how each step is conveyed, and really kind of trying to think of images that, I mean, it's funny, in this rotation, I realized you see two Rene Magritte's, the surrealist artist, who really, his work is so evocative. That's where you were
going with the lamppost.
His work is so evocative and emotional, especially, but also kind of finding images that were representational of different religions and dogmas and esoteric modalities too.
I remember an old collaborator of ours who is a licensed acupuncturist, and he was describing one of his first like meetings with his his master that he learned acupuncture from, and he's kind of like a wiry guy with a lot of energy, and he was like, well, when are we gonna do the needles, and the teacher just showed him an image, and like that's a very like beautiful idea that's the needles are just one way of conveying energy, and there's so many other ways of sort of transferring energy. And so, now the way that we've always taken in images, but being able to sort of first absorb an image and then learn more from a caption, and then you sort of, you find your way in, even if you kind of go, oh, page 108, might be something, and then that's your way in, and chances are it's going to be something that stimulates and changes you. Because it found you, yeah. Like that.
Nick, this is a original Nick Taylor right here. We were
Obviously
looking.
a story behind that.
Oh yes. We were looking desperately for an image that conveyed this idea of duality and of interconnection, and.
That was a great, fun challenge, because Kikan had a very specific idea of like what she wanted it to express, and then the work of finding the absolute heaviest watercolor paper that you can purchase. I went to the art store and I was like, I need the thickest paper, so they give us this paper, and they're like, that'll be $30, and I'm like, wait for this one piece of paper? Yeah, and then carefully allowing like water to sort of circulate and spread and then bleed, and
You made the image?
Yeah, that one.
Wow.
We made. Yeah.
Amazing.
Constant commentary from our 8-year-old. I don't like that.
That you were doing it wrong. Yeah.
Very, very wrong.
I don't like that color. Yeah.
No. Constantly being told no by an 8-year-old.
But the concept of those overlapping circles is such a critical concept in Jung's psychology. I mean, he's talking about human consciousness evolving through a movement between polarities, and therefore you have to, it's advantageous to learn to tolerate the tension, between polarities and contradictions. Otherwise we just end up projecting it out into the world and people and everything, and those sensations of those uncomfortable tensions, when we're living with polarities and indecision and all of that, it's just like when we don't know how to deal with difficult emotions. Same discomfort in the body, same thing, that lead people to want to numb with substances or compulsive behaviors. And I had found the most horrific overlapping circle at this at this manuscript library in Paris. No matter what you would do with this image, you couldn't even remotely make it work. And I tried so many different things. And Nick said, I could make one. Which was like amazing.
Okay, that was a good story. Thank you.
We had a question.
Hi, thanks a lot for the book. I'll say I started an AA meeting last week based on your book. We're going through your book from the beginning, but we're just going to read through it. It takes AA a while to approve anything, so, but I've always wondered about the origins and what came before, and I know that inside of the book, there's a lot of talk about, or at least there are chapters about, what Campbell went through and what this quest, the quest myth, and I'm always fascinated by Campbell because he was such a comparative religions expert and seeker. I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about where those Campbellian principles of this quest myth, in your mind or in your research, align with the 12 steps as a journey.
You're talking about Joseph Campbell, Man's Search for Meaning, just for anyone who in the room who didn't.
Or Hero of a Thousand Faces, or et cetera, et cetera. On and on and on.
I think
He
one
kind
of
of
Yeah, one of the sections that Kikan wrote, and you'll see it here, is this idea of the questsmith, of the seeker. So yeah.
Yes, I mean, goodness. There is a small section at the end, which has to do with the soul journeys that describes the overlapping between the hero's journey and the 12 steps. There are a few pages on that. I have had it. I remember watching the PBS series with Joseph Campbell and interviewed,
Bill Moyers.
Bill Moyers.
Exactly, thank you. And I even have the video cassettes of those, and read the books, etc. And then at ARAS, at the Archive for Research of Archetypal Symbolism, they have these sort of, boards on the walls. And one year there had been young students working there who just put together their whole hero's journey in images. And so they've been with me for a long time, and it is so universal what Campbell works, his work is so, as soon as somebody like Joseph Campbell, somebody like Collier, just if you really boil it down, if you come back to these principles that we go on journeys, we are called to step away from the comfort zone, and we're called out to adventure into the unknown, to learn to deal with the unknown, etc., etc., etc. And then to bring back, the gifts of our journeys back home to our community and share it and be of service through our adventures. So I hope you have a wonderful time doing this.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes up a lot in some of the groups that I've run, they really identify with the hero's journey, with recovery being a hero's journey, because the concept of the hero's journey is that there is a possibility of death. There's a possibility, you're always on that precipice of, I could fail, I could do this wrong, and I could die. And because of that, it puts this really deep sense of exploration and integration. So a lot of my clients really respond to that as well, the hero's journey.
Since the program is so action-oriented, I'm curious how you could speak about the intersection of action and these symbols, like how you can work with the imagery in recovery. Like, any practices you could point out.
Images are so personal. It's a little bit like a very tough thing for many people is to, many people are, what can I say, they're kind of scared of 12 steps because of the mention of God. Throughout the literature, the steps include the word God. And so Jung uses an archetype called imagery to describe that on the one hand, God is a very collective experience for all humanity. We've always related to powers greater than ourselves. And at the same time, it's deeply personal. So we might have a good relationship with it or not. All kinds of versions. But so with, for example, for somebody who's questioning, steps 2 and 3, where you're supposed to make a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, it could be that it would be so individual what symbol you would use for this quest of yours, It would represent the relationship that you have. It might be dormant, it might be passionate. But I just love having images to relate to, and yeah.
I want to this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately. This the action-oriented part of it, and I'm sure that they all have more eloquent things to say about it. But I remember talking to this guy who he was into knife and sword stuff. He's martial arts, and he would talk about System 1 and System 2. They're like, and I'm gonna get them probably wrong or backwards, but let's just, for the sake of discussion, say system 1 is like conscious action, physical things that you're doing, and system 2 is like what you start to embody, the things that are just natural. So maybe if you're a police officer and you practice, this is what I do in this situation over and over and over and over again, and then all of a sudden it just is in you. And then if you're faced with that situation, you know what to do. And like, it seems to me that the steps work in a similar way, where it's like, just do it. I mean, just do the thing, and don't think about why you're doing it, and then eventually it starts to absorb into your being, and then you do it right. Or not right, but you just do, it like becomes second nature. And then, you recommended this other book, The Secret of the Golden Flower,
Yeah.
which talks about circulating the light, the sort of the conscious action of doing things and not questioning them, and just doing them and doing them and doing them, and they absorb slowly over time.
And images, the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than words. So you can play with images as symbols and have all kinds of actions in relation to it. You could tear it up, you could copy it, I think that with symbols, anything is possible, really. I mean, they are so flexible, and they hold so many different meanings and such. It's a bit difficult to talk about it, though. It's a tough question to answer.
Well, I love what you're saying about images being so personal. One of the things that we do a lot of our therapy in recovery centers, because it is so personal, and the images can unlock something that's hard to articulate, because a lot of times the underpinnings of addiction are trauma that are pre-verbal. And so they don't have words to kind of describe where they're going, but they can do it through pictures. And so a lot of times we'll have them just run through art books and just see what grabs them. And then what happens is that a person starts beginning to say, I want to make this more personal. I'll make them, and they'll start creating their own. And usually we give them a framework of a mandala, because it's a fairly simple sort of framework for a person to be creative within, and it has some rules that are pretty easy to translate. So they'll make these amazing, incredible mandala that are personal about their recovery and where they are in the recovery. And then you'll see, when I've worked with people for several years, they'll do that 3 or 4 times a year, and then we'll see this wonderful progression through their mandala or through other artwork. So, and I love what you said about the brain. We think in pictures. Our brain is designed to do that. And also, the unfolding of the psyche comes through images, not through words. Because it's part of that, the 2 overlapping circles, the tension between the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. In Jung's idea, we're not only thinking about our own personal life, we're also thinking in terms of this collective unconscious that contains all of these other thoughts. So you walk into an AA meeting, there's also a collectiveness there that you're stepping into. That can be wonderful, but also can be terrifying. Because there are people there that are terrified and scared, and you can feel that energy. So, and a lot of times people can't talk about that, but they can draw it out.
We'll take one more.
Jessica. It's
We'll take 2 more. Calling on our friendship. So it's me. You know me. We'll take 2 more. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, Nancy.
Thank you for another beautiful book and for introducing me to this place, which has been amazing. I'm so excited to live close to it. And thank you all. And I was curious because I've been kind of in and out of 12-step programs, and I have 27 days today. Thank you. And but and that was not easy. It's been a long time to have that many days, but I if they've ever heard any of
Was
those
Bill
rumors.
W. tripping?
I mean, I've read literature that said the same thing. I mean, Kikan would know more, but I have also read literature, and there are 12-step meetings for people out. There are Alcoholics Anonymous meetings for people. This is a really difficult subject. I want to be careful what I say here, but who have used psychedelics. There is a lot of literature on that, actually, that, you know, I don't know if Kikan's included that, but yes, I also read that he worked with people in Los Angeles, specifically around psilocybin, and part of the spiritual experience was based from his experiences with that. Now, this is someone who is just...
People in Los Angeles.
I don't remember the names because I have a perimenopause brain, but I'm sure, you know, maybe Kikan knows more than I, but...
Well,
I know I have the literature somewhere at home.
yeah. Well, what's interesting is that, well, first of all, just responding to the whole idea of the steps necessitating a spiritual or a relationship with something greater than yourself. Any version is possible in recovery. You know, truly, it is not, there are agnostics, there are atheists, there are many different forms of having a relationship with something other. It can be the group, it can be, you know, it's named many, many different things. It constitutes this something other than yourself, you could even call it, you know, because we have sort of, ultimately human beings, when they admit what they can't do, change by themselves, and they ask for help, they're asking for something else other than themselves. I don't know how to really put it, I'm really thrown by the question. However, so that's one thing. The other is that there was a second letter from Bill W. to Jung, which is not in the public eye, where Bill speaks about exactly this, that he wanted Jung's opinion about the usefulness of, it was mushrooms, yes. And it's...
You can talk to me later, I can give you more information.
Okay.
I don't know if I can do that on a group level.
So it was true. There's many, you know, this obviously we're at a moment where plant medicines are really at the fore, and there's many microdosing therapeutic ways, and it is said to be very helpful for addictive behavior. So, but under the right circumstances. All right, we had.
Yeah, right here. Romero, thank you for your book. I love the talk. 2 questions. You say, sir, that you navigate the subconscious visually with some images. I'm very drawn to like Goya, the black painting specifically. Very negative, very bleak, very disturbing pictures. I mean, would you say that is more unhealthy as opposed to, you know, something else, you know, other like Michelangelo or, you know, Botticelli?
I would never, the first thing is we never want to judge
Yes.
how the psyche is unfolding. So we just want to observe it with a kind of sort of a neutral space of, oh, this is what I'm resonating with right now, and what is the opportunity for growth from that? Am I trying to integrate some part of myself that is speaking to this? So I would never judge what someone presents. I would just say, what is it representing to you, and where did you go with that? You know, see where that leads you. Sometimes people will start trying to integrate parts of themselves that they've split off, Jung's idea of the shadow, that we throw just a lot of stuff that feels unacceptable into the shadow, including parts of ourself that are violent, the psychotic parts of the personality, all of those things that lie within us. And so we have to be in relationship with that somehow. So people come in and I'm just very neutral to, it's not my job to judge what they're coming in with, but to assist them in what that means to them.
Just process it.
Yeah, just process. And it changes over time. But the idea of trying not to judge ourselves as wrong with that is the core principle, I think, of AA. It is the thing that they would get together and say, look, we can help each other because we are natives of this land. And there's no judgment, it's a judgment-free zone. Because when you're judging it, anything we judge creates so much energy onto that thing. And our brain pays a lot of attention to things we judge. And that negative bias of the brain says, oh, this must be really important, I'm gonna hang on to it. So we actually hang on to things that we have a lot of judgment about, even negative things about ourselves.
Thank you so much for the answer. And then also another question. I know in later correspondence, we also spoke about the importance of integration, like ACA, right? And how that would be the next level of the program in itself. Does your book happen to kind of touch on the process of individuation?
Well, two things. One, yes, Bill W. absolutely thought that the next frontier of AA was emotional sobriety, and a fellowship like ACA is absolutely outstanding. Like Amanda was talking about the literature being very contemporary, extremely emotionally intelligent, very practical with workbooks to do this and that and the other. And the other part, the individuation, yes, I did. I basically mentioned individuation in the chapter on Jung as the sort of umbrella of all his different concepts. You know, I use it and I suppose the journey of an individuation being another journey to help, you know, of healing and transformation. I do speak about it, yes.
I'm just gonna, we've got someone right there, as well, two of you there.
Hi, my name is Cleve, and I'm a health coach, and I just came back from a retreat, and the image that you talked about of the lotus really resonated. And it also kind of connected to the last step. I noticed you chose bodhisattva image for this 12th step of helping others. I wonder, can you elaborate a little bit on how you came to that conclusion? Because this image right here, what is the significance? Why did you choose Buddhism over others? Just very curious about that choice and what that means.
This image came from Nick. I was using another image of to illustrate compassion, given that the Dalai Lama had said that compassion is the radicalism of our times. And compassion, you know, speaks so loudly about service to others. This, I cannot pronounce the name of this particular Buddha, but it is the Buddha of all the Buddhas of compassion. I mean, how could you not choose it then in the end? And it was recommended by Nick when the one that I had, you know, I don't know what happened to that one. It's not as beautiful as this.
But I don't, to answer your question specifically, I don't think that there's a necessary attachment of a particular sort of religious or sort of theological vein that is specifically attached to step 12 in our consciousness. That it's, you know, this book is really a very open dialogue that brings it all together. And I mean, I remember, you know, in AA, it's like a power other than yourself is literally anything. And so that it's attached to a particular sort of theological point of view is not specific. Yeah.
All right. I think this is wonderful. Thank you all so much. We are, as I said, they are opening up the beautiful library. Kikan will be signing books in there. There's amazing drinks and snacks. And feel free to come up and talk to us. Really cannot thank everyone enough for coming and joining this celebration of this incredible manifestation of Kikan's thought into form, The Alchemy of Creativity in Action. Congratulations.